Alright, so I've got a couple of people in Discord with me today. Bolas and Dustin have been kind enough to hop in. And
Hello, we are here to both harass and help the streamer in equal measure.
correct. That is
I
that is in fact exactly why they are here. Bolas has also volunteered a recently rewritten draft chapter of his that I will be taking a very brief look at to see what value I can add. But basically the goal of this stream is to laugh about a little and kind of hit on a bit of everything at once. I've done absolutely minimal prep, but I have done a little bit of prep, by which I mean I've asked people to post stuff and Bolas posted a thing. And also I brought up a bunch of links to a bunch of tabs with how do I put this, with prompt generation stuff on them. So we'll go through those as well. Absolutely no point standing on the intro screen if everyone's read the meme already. I feel particularly clever about this one. But yeah, let's do it. All right, so instead of going with a normal document, I've just straight up gone, okay, I'm going to use flowchart design documents to throw together fiction on the design level. But first I'll look at Bolas's. It did download, right? Where did I put it?
How unprepared is the streamer? Let's find out, chat.
Extremely. Details. Rewrite docx PDF. Amazing. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why I generated two of those,
Got
but
him.
it's fine. Whatever.
You can see it. You can see it. Perfect.
We cannot see it.
You can see it now. Stream's on a delay. All right. So you've just rewritten. Is this all chapter 1?
Yeah, that's right.
That's really long. Okay, you said you were most concerned about the last 5 pages.
Right. Are you familiar with chapter 1? And
I was familiar with it before you rewrote it.
okay, fair enough.
Excellent preparation. All right, let's do this.
Okay, so quick.
Fake it till you make it, chat.
Quick summary. Exactly. Well, hey, that's how we got here to begin with, isn't it? So quick summary: the main character is turned into a massive snake with arms, so like a naga, basically. And they're stuck in their apartment, and they're trying to deal with their new bodily shape, which they are only so good at manipulating. I really need to move these balls before.
Yeah,
you can knock more shit off onto your desk.
Yeah.
Summary was on point.
Okay. So, is there a place you want me to start? Because I can see you've got him dealing
right
with.
Right there's fine.
Okay. Okay, so it's transformed as lying on the back. Concept and execution were two very different things. I was lying on my back, so what did I need to do? The desk was about 2 feet away from my bed. It was up against the wall to my left, and in that gap was a large office chair with cheap and fraying fake black leather. I like this. I like that sentence. I could either use the chair as a springing off point to try standing upright, or I could forgo it and I could stand up. Try to stand up at the foot of my bed. You've got him doubling over here, I assume, or are you just kind of crawling around in a circle?
He is okay, so he wakes up on his back with the head of his body on his like pillows as a person would normally sleep. Then he tries to double over on himself,
Yeah, okay. Reach the edge of the bed. Search their toes. I've forgotten plans far ahead. What are you worried about? The mechanics of it? Because the prose is fine. You've got actual paragraphs. Like I've had a few too many cases in the last week or two of looking at prose where there's just the fundamental structure is just not in place. Like there's no paragraphs. There's it's not clear what the topic is. It's not clear who's speaking or who the point of view character is. This has none of those problems.
Most concerned about the characters feeling one or two dimensional.
Okay. This is a very bad example scene for that because he's trying to solve a mechanical problem rather than showing off his personality. So, like, I can look at this, but it won't tell me much about characterization. Unless you're speaking specifically about his mechanical slash physiological responses, like emotion through physiology.
Then maybe we can skip ahead of
Okay.
a bit because that is a valid uh, observation. I would say that a lot of what the characterization
Yep.
is in the first half of this. He likes Rubik's cubes. He's in college for programming, that sort of thing.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So you've got he's trying to move. He's not doing well. Physical distress, emotional distress. Still called hungry. Couldn't. Yep. That should be lay there. I just lay there. Or lie. Yeah, I just lay there for a while. I don't want to actually give up because death. Yeah, that's fair. You could have a scene break here, and that would mount the tension a little bit better because then you've got, instead of having his partners show up at a convenient moment, you've got, I don't know how much time passed here. I was busy wallowing in my despair, which makes the emotion sink in a bit deeper. Yep.
Okay.
Way fainter than I remembered. Right, hearing through vibrations. I like that you haven't specified a reason. Like you haven't got a he turned and saw me, because Nate may not necessarily have like access to that perception. Um, this is you should yeet this, put it in a separate notepad file, and then inject them over time into the story as you write it. You don't need a description like this simply because you can have Jackson show these parts of himself rather than have Nate summarize them, and that'll come across more strongly.
It does also just seem a little bit out of place at this point in time.
I
Okay,
think I think that was partly intentional on Bolas's part, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. Like you're playing with the mood whiplash, and that's not a bad thing. But specifically, a list of characteristics about this guy would land better coming from him than it would from Nate.
And because normally all of this should be like split up across the actual dialogue and whatnot. Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, exactly. Not necessarily even across dialogue. It doesn't have to be dialogue. It can be actions or behaviors. And hey, if you have a list of 10 characteristics and you get to the end of the story and you've only managed 8, then you don't have to shoehorn in the other 2, right? What the character shows is more important than what other people know about him from context. And all that we've established that they're in a relationship, right? And that's the only thing this really establishes in the moment is that Nate trusts Jackson, at least to a relatively significant degree, and that's something you can probably drop in the next couple of pages, in the sense that like Jackson might be having an adverse reaction to what it's seeing, but Nate is, I'm not going to say comfortable, but thinks it is worth the risk to kind of wait and let Jackson make his own decisions. Because he's low-key expecting the decisions to come out in his favor because of that trust that he
has. That's a good point.
Yeah, and yeah, the material is good. It's just it can be injected into more efficient spots. All right. I like this. It's a very it's a very real problem. I tried to gesture what exactly. Having trouble thinking. Yep. I think you could also get a lot of mileage here out of counting time. And I don't mean like actually physically counting time, like going the seconds ticked past or whatever. I mean, in a lot of novels, even though people try to pretend this isn't the case, talking is actually a free action. It might only be a free action on the scale of seconds or handfuls of seconds, like 10 or 20 seconds might get compressed into 2 or 3 for the purpose of kind of getting a message across, especially if you're looking at a character's thoughts. But in this specific moment, I think Nate thinking should cost him time that should be reflected in Jackson's behavior. You've got this guy sitting on his bed going, holy shit, what do I do? But that doesn't mean Jackson is suddenly full and comatose. He's standing there, he's staring, and he's expecting something. Right? He might not necessarily know what that something is, but is and I'm not even going to say his patience is limited, but his composure is limited, and that should show. And again, it's not something you critically have to do, but it would increase the pressure without necessarily changing the context.
So in other words, each of them is expecting the other to make the first move.
Not even, but like he's trying to make a decision, right? I was still having trouble thinking and I couldn't really consider my options too well. Did I try to point towards my phone? Did I reach out my hand for help? Did one try to mime whether I needed the phone? That should probably be I. But that's fine. This doesn't need us. Like the spelling pass is not why we're here. But he's sitting there and thinking, and they might not necessarily expect each other to make the first move. But Jackson's mind is still going in the interim. So maybe Jackson shifts impatiently, or maybe he glances at Nate, or maybe he takes a step in a direction and then freezes. It's like this train of thought is exactly the sort of train of thought that could be derailed by something Jackson does, because Jackson should be able to do things while Nate is thinking. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, that sounds very good.
But yeah, usually talking is a free action, right? The universe stays still while people have their conversation. But in this case, you can get away with violating that. Probably good effect. And then yeah, Nate, as it is, Nate leisurely gets to the end of his okay, not leisurely for him necessarily, but in terms of pacing, leisurely makes it to the end of his train of thought, tries something and then it fails, and only then does he get a reaction from Jackson. Yep. Okay, so we figured out thumbs up and thumbs down. See if you can show this via body language as well. Like, just because he's a snake doesn't mean he's lost the ability to look visibly distressed, possibly in a way that Jackson might parse.
Okay, sounds good. That's gonna be interesting.
Actually, now that I say that, I'm looking at this whole section, and you could get a lot of emotion into this because you're describing a lot of body language, and you've got a lot of sorry, not necessarily body language, but you're describing a lot of internal emotional processing, and you've got a lot of dialogue. But what you can do is you can kind of connect the two. It is doing a thing. Okay, but you can kind of, there we go. My hands are actually linked. You just can't see because my hand tracking crap. But you can actually connect the two and interlace your body language with your dialogue and your emotional processing. So like, what's a good example? This is a good point to actually try out an example. This is a very temporary word processor solution. Sorry. So what have we got? We have. I was having trouble thinking, and I couldn't really consider my. Okay, so let's start with. He flinched and yelled out a sharp fuck. So. Can I? Nah, I'll just. This will do as a section. It's time. Okay, ignore the lack of formatting.
Formatting is a future Drake problem.
Formatting is a never Drake problem because we're not writing it. Well, not right now at least. All right. Feel his footsteps as he approached. Come on. Okay. Each one vibrated through the ground, and it felt as if they were right next to me. Okay, so this I would move around, not necessarily remove, but just oh, we can that. All right, that's a good start. Let's go from there. I could feel his footsteps approached each one. Rather than it felt, he flinched and yelled out a sharp fuck. Here is what you've done is you've replaced Nate's response to this with a description of Jackson. So your first question is, how does Nate respond? And is it in a way that Jackson notices and reacts to? And ultimately, all you have to do is you have to ask yourself this question about every character every time someone does it. Because you've got a narrative and you're progressing the narrative through the dialogue, and you are having a certain level of action and reaction, but it's only happening in dialogue, and the emotional processing, while present and kind of delaying Nate's ability to have that interaction, isn't tightly coupled into the dialogue, and that's something you could definitely fix. So you've got a response by Nate. Maybe Nate flinches. Maybe he just kind of looks at Jackson, and having the undivided attention of a giant snake person can definitely be a little disconcerting. But also you can probably get rid of this and kind of go from the reaction straight into, well, this is the reaction actually. So if I look at that and go, okay, he flinched and yelled out a sharp fuck. I looked up and Jackson towered over my position on the floor. There is also another thing here where you're trying to do both characters' reactions justice. You are trying to show the reader what Nate is feeling, but also what Jackson is feeling. But this is not a problem that you've introduced into the text necessarily. It's just a nature of the scene you're trying to tackle, I think, which is in this case that you're writing a heavily emotionally colored scene for a character who is in distress, but it's diluted by your trying to show both characters' emotions. So you've got Jackson towering, which is an entirely reasonable interpretation for Nate. Like, okay, maybe Jackson isn't a threat, but Nate is legitimately worried about what Jackson will think, how he'll react, and there's this implied threat to Jackson's presence, even if it doesn't come through in his behavior. But then you've got him scrambling back out of the doorway, eyes wide and almost tripping over himself, which 100% is factually probably actually what happens. But is that how Nate would see it? Or would Nate just kind of see Jackson drop out of his field of view or move back and not necessarily pause that it was a clumsy avoidance? So yeah, you've got a heavily emotionally colored scene, but you're diluting it with a bit of a mixture of two different perceptions. And it's not easy to fix because what you have is already pretty good. It's technically accurate, and the approach you'd have to take to it would be to really, really get in your character's head. Go, I'm sitting on this bed. What can I see? What can I actually sense? And how does time work? Remembering time while writing is really difficult. But I think this is solid, and I think legitimately that's the only piece of advice I'd give for this section. Is, well, that all of it, right? Basically all of the feedback I've given that you posted in Discord is different flavors of get inside your character's head, stay there, and show what it's like. If it's distressing, show that it's distressing. And let his emotions color his perception. And I think you can get something really impactful out of that if you filter it that way. Because this scene between Nate and Jackson should be one of the most upsetting scenes for Nate to experience. Because yeah, hell, I'm sure he'll go through various flavors of hell, and I know that he has a whole panoply of problems to deal with later in the story. But this is the biggest outside context problem the man has to deal with in the story. When you kind of go from the normal life of a college student to this, all the other things that happen to him are almost by definition less shocking, right? Like the epistemic distance is shorter. Because yeah, okay. Interuniversal or interdimensional telepathy is completely whack, but compared to already having turned into a snake, it's kind of comparable. Like, you've already got that initial shock out of the way. But
Is everything?
yeah.
I'm just writing down everything.
Yeah, I can see that, and I'm no stress. If you have a comment or anything, feel free to interrupt me, because there's a lot of material here that I can go into. But I think the most valuable thing is, yeah, what you've bolded essentially, which was fix this hard, really internalize what they're thinking at the time while writing. And don't. This is not general advice. This does not apply to your entire novel, but to this specific scene, which is so heavily emotionally colored, I think it's. I hesitate to say critical. Remember, I'm an amateur. All of this is from my own experience, and as much as I've done a little bit of reading and a little bit of discussion with my wife, who's done a lot more reading on this topic than I have. It is. I am still very much not a professional, not any sort of authority on this. Okay, so you've got that. And I think this here. So when Jackson goes, Nate, I'm gonna have to step over you. Is that okay? That little statement, is that okay? The question could also be very impactful and could be very grounding to Nate, especially if you play up the distress in the earlier part of their interaction. Because Nate really is hanging on Jackson's every word. And there's quite a few of those words, even in this dialogue as it stands, that could be very meaningful to him, which ordinarily he'd just kind of play off or ignore, or wouldn't have a lot of impact otherwise. This is new. You didn't have him cubing in the first draft, did you?
Kielo said he needs like an actual. He needs more dimensionality, and so giving him a hobby goes a long way towards that.
I think it's a good one too, because it establishes him as dexterous, in a specific category of skill, right? So like maybe cubing doesn't make you good at parkour, but you definitely have to have some sort of some level of agility in your hands and fingers to pull it off well.
Not to mention a lot of hand-eye coordination for it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's really interesting because it's something that he'll lose when he turns into a snake, but it's also something that he is almost uniquely suited to regain as well. It's something that he would put a lot of emphasis on building back up, and which might put him in better situations compared to the other transformed further down the track. Because come on, what normal person is going to sit there twitching their fingers for an hour, making sure they move right?
Well, not a software engineer. Or I mean, yes, not a non-software engineer.
Yeah, exactly.
A software engineer.
I mean, and the heavy usage of keyboards at computers might actually help a lot with that. Reteaching yourself to type, I can see that mapping well to general manual dexterity with your hands.
But both of those things are way down the line.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, right? You've got this established character trait which you can really build off of throughout the entire story. Don't think of it as, oh, this is way in the future. Think of it as this character trait can have almost its own character arc, and that can be of value.
Of all the things to have angst about, he's gonna angst over not being able to play through Rubik's cubes.
But that's fair. It's that's almost that's very yeah. Go on.
People deal with stress in different and sometimes really weird ways.
Oh, correct. But also, it's very human to worry the most about the smallest thing.
Yeah, like it's a little grounded. It's just like, man, I'm never gonna be able to play with a Rubik's cube anymore. To just like, this is something really small, but in the more grand scheme of just like his entire life is going to change. This is something really small to focus on now before he realizes, oh shit, way more stuff about my life is going to change later, as opposed to worrying about everything immediately and having a massive panic attack.
Exactly, and but again, all of the realizations can kind of come in sequence, and this is the exact sort of realization that can come in the most inconvenient moment, and it's like the grain of sand that tips the scales. It's just the thing that pushes you over the edge is almost always just the smallest thing. But yeah, continued interaction, very good. I do like that Jackson raises hypotheses that Nate just isn't even thinking about. Because Nate's too focused on like his own doom, what's happened to him, and just by definition of being an external third party, Jackson's immediately more qualified to just think of the big picture, even if the big picture is, what if aliens? Like, okay, he's not doing well, but it's a start, right?
He's also probably the more calm person here, having not suffered a traumatic emotional event. Well, not quite so much.
I would say that depends entirely on the nature and depth of their relationship, which is something this is also a really good time to explore.
That's also fair. That's fair.
Because hey, if they're really close, then the thing about really close emotional relationships is that you get physical wiring confusion between you and your partner, and you can actually get phantom pain if your partner's injured. And if you're that deep into it, then hell yes, you can get projected distress to a similar degree from this sort of thing.
That's fair. That's
like,
fair. Yeah.
Almost like sharing your partner's dysphoria. But yeah, that's down to Bolas and what he wants to do with the characters, where he wants to put them, because the last draft I read had them close, but unsure how to translate their closeness into Nate's new form and the resultant change to the relationship, which I think was really interesting from a character development and the perspective of actually attacking the problem. But it doesn't necessarily have to remove emotional tension at the same time either, because they could become colder on the surface, but individually they could still be very much very distressed and almost like very, very emotionally hot on the topic. I'm assuming that Bolas, I'm assuming you never plan to write from Jackson's point of view explicitly.
Oh, no.
Which makes the problem both easier and harder, because it's easier because you only have to focus on one side of the relationship, but it's harder because as a result, you might not necessarily have as clean a view of the relationship as you would like. If you run into problems there, I'd almost recommend writing out Jackson's part and just not including it in the book.
That sounds like a good idea.
Because I think also, if you did try to write that alternative point of view, any kind of personality character clashes would become immediately clear, and also it'll just flesh Jackson out naturally. The moment you try to be someone, they become more real on paper, whether you want them to or not. I think that's about it. I think Jackson had confirmed it after all. This was all real. What is Nate basing this on?
Oh, he made a list for earlier in the chapter of like a of like prioritizing what exactly is the most important thing. If you scroll it up, it's like the only thing in the whole document with numbers, or with a number list.
Oh, okay. Let me try. No, that's I found the page numbers. Hold on. There we go. How could I confirm with this? I still like the zero based list. Very programmer like. How could I confirm whether this was real or not? This could probably be solved practically by my boyfriend confirming it. I mean, the problem with his boyfriend confirming it is, what if he's hallucinating his boyfriend as well? Like
that is also addressed. He also has that thought, and he decides like that way lies madness, basically.
Oh yeah, I do remember that from the earlier draft as well. And that is fair. You do have to kind of draw that line. I mean, if you're hallucinating a consistent universe, it may as well be real. How could I move? I want the mirror. How could I talk? How could I eat things? Turn back. Anything else I can right now? Thank you. I appreciate this footnote a lot. Turning back required knowing what caused this in the first place, and also operating under the real. Yeah, why me specifically? Item number 1. Learn. Speech. Item list. Concept and execution. Okay, and then we go into the move. Okay, so did I skim over it? I might have skimmed over it. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add here. I think honestly, I've said so much about this that you're gonna be stuck in approaching the scene again for like literal hours. I'm sorry for.
No, I think we got everything we needed. And Dustin has just redeemed a water break, so I think that's a good time to first get water and then move on to your actual writing prompts, because it's been 38 minutes.
That is true, but you've provided me good content, and thank you very much for sending me that and letting me look over it on stream, because there was actually some really interesting stuff in there.
Thank you, man.
Okay, I am going to chuck BRB up real quick and actually get some more water. We'll be right back.
I knew that calling for a sippy time would be a good idea.
Yeah, you guys aren't hot, so you can talk about whatever while I'm Wait, no, you are hot. Never mind. As am I. I'm still hot. Okay. Let me mute everything. Yep. No, that was good. All right. Thank you for the drink break. Let's hop back on. What have I done? Okay, unmute this. Very good. All right, perfect. So, what have we got? I have this entire set of websites, but I fear that not a lot of them will be particularly useful. But we've got Dustin setting. We've got Dustin setting, and I've got to get the cards. Let me go get the cards. I'll be back shortly.
Remember, kids, flashcards are important and useful.
Well, it is not obvious to me where the cards are. They're being stored separately from the board games, so we will have to do without the cards. Hopefully, one of these writing prompt websites will fill in for us. Dustin, do you mind if I bring up your tweet screen?
I absolutely do not.
Perfect.
Oh, is this about the Soviet witches?
Correct.
Oh
This is
my
about
God.
the Soviet
Okay.
witches.
Yeah, I just brought them up, which is like, Shoulder's a writing friend. He might be interested in it.
Yep. Okay. So let's go through this real quick and note down the key aspects of the setting. Yeah, there we go. All right. Soviet command originally thought the Night Witches, which is a nickname for the night 508. Okay, so to start with, I have basically no historical context on any of this. I'm not a history buff, and I will be hitting Dustin up for any any details that I am missing.
All right.
All right. The Night Witches was just a nickname for the 588th Night Bombers. So did the German soldiers who called them such. No one but the witches themselves knew how true that moniker was. It didn't take long for both sides to figure out the truth. Soviets find out the truth about the 588th after investigating the suspiciously low amount of supplies being used for the number of sorties they were reporting. Suspecting cowardice, officers were sent to discover the truth of the matter of this pilot. So you've got Soviets. You've got specific company, 588th Night Bombers.
Yeah, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. I think they might be a Guards Night Bomber Regiment by the end of the war, which is getting into a whole other unrelated thing.
I don't know what that means. Just assume I have no context on anything military other than like some of the ranks.
Well, even just with the Soviet stuff, it's really weird. Basically, if you were a Guards Regiment, it's a sort of pseudo ceremonial title I'm just like, hey, this unit did really well in the field, and they are now a guard of the Soviet Union.
Oh,
and
I
this
see.
continued into the actual Russian Federation military of just borrowing a bunch of shit from the Soviet Union, that's just kind of
Yeah.
a lot of what happened with Russia. I think they might have been a night guard. Apologies, a guards bomber regiment. I'm not sure about that, but they were one of a few all women pilot flight regiments in the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah,
And
hence the Night Witches.
Yeah. Well, the Night Witches is actually related to the specific bomber planes that they would use, which were old like biplanes, where they would actually shut their engines off like about a mile out from their target and just glide in with their engines off, drop their bombs, and then hit their engines and bug out. So they would make this really eerie whistling sound that the Germans would relate to the brooms of witches. Like, you know how witches ride on broomsticks? That kind of thing. It sounded really eerie like that.
Yeah.
And so they started calling them Nachthexen, or night witches.
I need you guys to do me a favor, and if I try to start trying to write something based on this, I need you to tell me no. And you guys can have this concept. I'm not doing anything with this. I don't have time for another writing concept. I'm like 5 concepts deep at this point. Whoops.
I'm proud of you, King.
No, you're not. I mean,
Yes, I am.
fine. Yes, you are. Okay. Service found out the truth. Officers were sent to investigate. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the sight of the return of one such sortie, shot to hell and with mostly full fuel tanks and only missing a small amount of munitions. But clearly having been flying for as long as they would need to get there and back. That's very interesting to me because it comes back to exactly what I told Bolas about grounding the scene in emotion. So you've got an investigation by the officers, and the officer is, to use the phrase indelicately, on a witch hunt. Because he's faced with a regiment that's underperforming. Right? So specifically investigating with the expectation, finding and the performing and for prisoners personnel. So this guy comes in and he finds something that doesn't make sense. So what's the first thing that he does? Does he lead by investigating, getting to the bottom of the inconsistency? Or does he lead by going around and blaming people?
It's also hard to see exactly how to approach this structurally because it's half world building, half a personal character focus, which is interesting. But it does lead to some complex things you have to handle out. You have to handle.
That is true, but then the question is, what is your destination format? What do you actually want to make out of this, right? Okay, so we've got the Soviets, we've got the Night Bombers, we've got this concept of guard, which may or may not apply in the moment, but probably applied at some point. They're being investigated by officers, and they're being investigated specifically due to usual profile of okay, so and that's another thing because they're using less resources, which in any other setting would be laudable. That's what you want to minimize. So that could be related to the high performance, but then that's weird. So it gets investigated, and then it gets investigated. investigated with the expectation of finding people who are causing problems of some sort, and they don't even know enough about this to say what the nature of the problems are, but so somebody is showing some sort of problem here. Okay, then where were we? No, okay. Upon arrival to the witches' camps, okay, you're only missing a small amount of munitions. After some light questioning interrogation of the pilots and their okay, so how come they're hiding the magic, but light questioning is enough to make him give it up? And this hinges on the core question, which isn't touched on in your take on this, which is why was magic being hidden to begin with?
If you're asking me, keep in mind it's been like 2 years since I wrote this,
Yeah,
and
of course.
this was entirely a frame of train of thought, so I wasn't super thinking it through. I'm just like, this makes sense. This is cool, or whatever, something like that.
Yep.
It's a little bit based in my interpretation of cultural history of that time period, as well as the want for this sort of destructive thing to not be widely made use of and utilized in such a grand industrial total war, unless absolutely necessary.
Yep.
And so it was just, a small group of ladies who just so happen to all be witches or be able to be trained into witches who were making use of this on their own to be able to, deal with a genocidal military that wanted them all to die.
Yeah.
In the Nazi Germans.
Okay, so you've got cultural conditioning, including the search. And then you've got the Bayesian conspiracy being the will to restrict destructive technologies to those gatekeeping destructive technology behind a certain level of understanding, which hopefully implies a certain level of responsibility, though not necessarily so.
Shoulder, I'm calling you the fuck out. Sorry, I'm calling you out for having read HPMOR.
Okay, well, call me out all you want. I'm sure you've read it too.
How dare you?
I mean, clearly you've read it, otherwise you wouldn't be aware of it.
There you go. The call out is the shibboleth itself. Check and mate, bolas. Anyway. After some light questioning and interrogation, the Red Army was now aware. Okay. I'm going to put that in its own box. Okay, so what you need here is an incentive. It can be. I'm actually going to put. Got light questioning and interrogation.
Like an incentive to give up the hiding of this
of the magic, right?
technique.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got two options. You've got what I'm going to do. Group this. But then I will get. Sure. So the thing about the incentive is it's almost a separate section, because what it does is defining the relationship between the military-industrial complex, Soviet Union of the time, and the magic user. And what that does, more importantly, is it There we go. Okay, so well, you've got you've got two main categories, right? You've got carrot and stick.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of content, no matter which one you go for. And ultimately, as with any human relationship, you're gonna have a combination of both. And then let me read ahead a bit, and then I'll come back to this. Screen? No. There we go. Light questioning the Red Armies now. The Germans found out from a similar source that this night witch had been put down and and that's the thing, right? You've got I'm gonna create a separate section. You've got you've got two main groups. You've got the Soviets and you've got the Germans. I'm assuming this was set right around World War II.
Yeah, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment was entirely active during most of World War II. I think they might have finally been disbanded in 1944 or 45. But yeah, they were very involved in the fighting, and that's when this is set, is like in the middle heat of World War II and the fighting on the Eastern Front.
Yeah. So you've got the temporal setting, you've got the Soviets and the Germans, and then you've got the Night Witches. And they ostensibly belong to the Soviet regiments, but are they a subset of the Soviet forces, or are they an interested third party that can form its own relationships with the other two?
I think the relationship that I was going with at the time, if I were to apply one retroactively, is that it is just like the actual Night Witches, the regiment of the Soviet Red Air Force at the time, that just happened to be made up of, I think, primarily Ukrainian farmers, or well, not necessarily farmers, but like Ukrainian women. And at this time period, Ukraine, as it is kind of now, but even more extremely, was significantly more poor and more rural than the Greater Soviet Union or Russian Federation, in this case, and so would be, I guess, in my opinion, more likely to retain to these older forms of like folk knowledge and I'm blanking on a term here, but like folk tradition, I guess.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing.
Sorry, I accidentally left the voice chat.
Kind of necessarily to be able to survive under the very rough, poor conditions that they were being treated as, sort of under the Soviets, and kind of just in general, as the Ukraine has very much been treated as just a semi-disposable breadbasket by Russia as a whole for many a while.
Right. So then, how did Soviets form regiments then? Was this by conscription entirely?
Okay.
Because how do you get a single
yes,
regiment that has so many such clear cultural definition? Right? Like, why aren't the magic users scattered across multiple regiments, eking out what little aid or progress they can in secret on an individual basis? How are they concentrated in a single regiment?
I think the with the female okay, so women in the Soviet Red Army were entirely if they were conscripted, they were usually placed into a nurse role, and even if they volunteered, they usually were.
Yep.
However, female aviators were entirely purely a volunteer force.
Yep.
So female aviators were entirely volunteer, and especially for something as dangerous as flying really old, shitty biplane bombers at night over heavily occupied German positions, they suffered a remarkably low amount of casualties for the stuff that they were doing, partially because their gear was really old,
Yep.
And it was slower than the German planes could actually intercept. Like, the max speed of the planes that they were using were lower than the stall point on most German fighter aircraft at the time.
Oh, that's interesting there, because yeah, okay, it's hard to escape, but it's also hard to hit in certain ways.
Yeah.
Okay, which brings us to an interesting question. If women are assigned into nurse roles by default, but there is an option to volunteer for aviation, what is it about the specific nature of the patriotism that these people have? The magic system they use, and the individual or group goals that makes them go for aviation over nursing. Because one could argue a healer could make a massive impact on military forces if they went into work as nurses, and yet instead they've gone into clearly offensive roles. And you can't answer that without defining the magic system to some degree, and also without going into their specific cultural history as a subset of well, Ukrainian. I don't want to say peasants, but like folk Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another reason why I wouldn't necessarily call them peasants is because a lot of them had existing interests in aviation before the war started, and I think a lot of them were already had like pilot's license.
Huh.
So they weren't necessarily super poor.
Yeah.
But
they were just
they
kind
had
of
some sort of
lived off in the middle of nowhere and weren't really involved with government directly.
Yeah, they were eking out their own lives, doing their own sorts of things, but they had this interest in flying airplanes. Not necessarily being super involved within actual Soviets or the local Soviet Republic of Ukraine government, outside of maybe having some ties to it to be able to go to flight school. But beyond that, not being super involved actually politically and governmentally and having particularly over much control.
Okay, well, here's my next question. Okay, so you've got pre-existing interest in aviation, which is actually a really good starting point for outlining that. Let's color this in black, but not. And then okay, and that there still needs to be a magic system, but that also provides substantiation. So then my next question is, how does minimal government involvement jive with patriotism?
The desire for Ukraine to continue to exist and not be genocided off the face of the earth by the Nazis.
I mean, don't you already have the Soviet Union? Is Ukraine really still a thing?
Yes and no. The Soviet Union's kind of weird.
I'm deeply aware.
The way I remember it, which I could entirely be misremembering, is that Ukraine was kind of its own separate thing, where it was the Soviet Republic of the Ukraine.
Yep.
Where it's not in the United, where it's technically part of the United Soviet Socialist Republic,
but it's technically internally distinct, like state levels of distinct, maybe.
Enough that Ukrainians had to. It's distinct enough that Ukrainians couldn't be conscripted into the Red Army. They entirely volunteered to fight for another nation's military.
Intriguing. But yeah, you'd have to obviously run through and completely fact check all of this as you wrote. This is why I stay in high fantasy and I stay the hell away from historical fiction, because if I get something severely wrong, all I'm going to upset is like Tolkien fans and not like entire countries worth of people.
And this is something that I'm not enough aware of at the time to be able to be super true. I'm bits and pieces correct. I know that. But I don't have enough of an extra knowledge base to
you can build 100%
correct.
You can build an entire alternate historical fic off of a few scraps of historical knowledge, provided that once you're done fleshing out the actual story, you go back and actually research all the history required to seat the fiction correctly in context.
Yeah. Oh, I've done that. And it turns out that it's really hard.
Oh, I know. Most of that is.
for my own story, I'm taking historical or like a real historical setting, and then significantly warping it, so I have the worst of both categories.
But yes, as far as I'm aware, the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine, or of the Ukraine, because I think it might have been the Ukraine at the time, was entirely separate, had military and political ties to the Soviet Union, but was not subservient. It had not been subsumed into it yet.
Oh, right, because this was
And
during the war, right? And then afterwards was when it really got consolidated.
yeah,
Hold on,
and then
I'm
was
really
released
quickly
sometime in
googling
the
history of the
90s.
Soviet Union.
Please do. Like, if I'm being wrong, I would rather be corrected on it than
Well,
not.
let's figure this out now rather than building an entire alternate history on it, right? Okay.
Yeah. Even though I am kind of still doing that.
Formed in 22 by a treaty between Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Transcaucasia, which I don't think exists anymore. I've never heard of it somehow. 1922 to 1991, flagship communist state. Da 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 da. Okay. Let me just control F Ukraine. All right. Splitting disputed territories. Okay. In 1921, during a related war against Poland, the Peace of Riga was signed, splitting disputed territories in Belarus and Ukraine between the Republic of Poland and Soviet Russia. Okay, so basically they ended up in the middle of a conflict and had to choose a side, and that's how this started. Treaty on the creation of the USSR, Stalin era, 27 to 53. And that would be, okay. Close cooperation between the USSR and the West developed in the early 30s. Soviet Union, okay. Made a dramatic shift towards Nazi Germany in 39. So this isn't World War II then, if they're fighting the Germans. It's immediately after the war, isn't it?
No.
No?
World War II was deliberately the Soviet Union and Germany. Because, like, I forget what exact year. It's either 41 or 43 that the night bombers were super, like, doing stuff. Because they did end up getting disbanded, as far as I'm aware, before the war ended. But Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union actually had relatively super close ties until, well, close ties as in they knew one was going to betray the other at some point. They were just making the best out of their relationship beforehand. Case in point, the invasion of Poland, where both countries invaded and split Poland down the middle, and the constant fighting between Red Army and Nazi Wehrmacht partially led to increase in tensions, which eventually led into the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Real quick, there is a concern that further discussion in the like using the specific noun there might actually demonetize a shoulder if we continue.
That is not my intent. I apologize.
What's this, sorry? Oh, the discussion of that element of history. I mean,
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
I will just refer to them as Germany from here on out.
Yeah, may as well. So what happened? It turns out they existed from 42 to 45, and they were raised to guard status in 43. So now you've got a specific temporal setting for your event, right?
Yeah, I was actually thinking around 1943 was when this whole thing happened.
Well, you've got a clear excuse for them being raised to guard status. Someone discovered they were magic and decided to make them more prominent, more functional in context, right?
True. Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I would. Where did I put it? God of the Soviet Union. Whoops.
Right there.
But yeah, you just chuck an arrow here. And connect it to the magic system box, and then worry about the rest later. Perfect. Flawless victory. No, I'm not saving that. Anyway. Okay. Would you rather a militant furry New World Order or an old world Aztec furry empire? Well, the main difference between these, if we had a militant furry New World Order, I'd have to live in it. Whereas an old world Aztec furry empire, I can just read history books about and not worry about too much. Otherwise, but I would say no. I'm gonna stick with old world Aztec furry empire because functionally, the only real difference between these is that one of these isn't my problem.
Yeah, because it's a good question, because the Aztecs were really bad.
Oh, well, they were really bad in certain ways, right? Like, they had this whole human sacrifice thing going on, and it was really elaborate and really gruesome, and I'm not getting into it further here. And furries would probably just make it worse, let's be honest. Yeah. Humans suck. You heard it here first.
Humans suck, be a dragon instead.
Oh man, I think I can't remember what this was exactly, but I heard about someone put together a fantasy series which was like basically a soap opera but with dragons, and the fact that it was with dragons made it so much worse. Like the level of violence, betrayal, and just like evisceration just went up to 11.
There's no meaningful distinction between soap operas and pro wrestling in terms of how they're written.
Instead of a soap opera, it elevated and became a telenovela.
Oh. All right, so you've got the discovery of the magic system. So the biggest issue I still have with this setting is the Night Witch is ostensibly willingly disclosing magic to the Soviets. Then you've got that one.
If I had to attach a simple answer to it, it's again the whole thing of Ukraine had to decide between either the Nazis or the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union at the time were the lesser evil.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just gonna put this an outline, and that's good enough. I'm sold on that stuff.
I said I was going to use that word. I apologize.
That's fine.
I don't want to get you demonetized or like banned off of Twitch.
That's fair. That would suck. So you've got defenders of allies. And here we come back to the magic system. If the defenders of a location were determined enough, then the necromancy just sort of happens on its own. You've got a lot of either magic system specification or historical retconning to do, because there have been many, many occasions in human history where that sort of emotion kind of happens. There's been a lot of groups of people that have cared a lot about a lot of different. If that makes sense.
What was this? This was specifically
the defenders of Soviet, and then okay, maybe those people were witches, and if that's the case, are you trying to limit magic to people with certain bloodlines, or is magic generally available? Is this Harry Potter, or is it like so you want to be a wizard? Actually, I haven't read enough of that to use it as a counterexample.
I think that realistically, with how Russia's kind of happened,
yep,
and just throughout history, it's like it may have started out in a few bloodlines, and just via crossbreeding and movement and all this other different kind of stuff would have just spread out so that everybody's technically capable of it at this point.
It's actually Hohenheim. It's actually based off a series of tweets. It is posted in. I don't think it's posted in the.
Yeah, I never posted it. I just sent it directly to you in a DM.
I'll drop it in writing. Context. So here's the chain of tweets that in the writing channel. No, it's all good. It's already there. But yeah, so then you've got kind of the hybrid situation, which is interesting because okay, so going back to Harry Potter and the Masters of Rationality, an assumption that story makes is that not only is control of magic limited to bloodlines, but it was designed this way. which means that it is dependent on a single genetic switch, or a single pair of genetic switches, one from each parent, right? So in Harry Potter, you've got Muggles, Squibs, Muggleborn, and Wizards. And Wizards have 2 of the copies of the gene. Muggleborn also have 2 copies of the gene, but they're born from Squib parents. Squibs have 1 copy of the gene, and then Muggles have no copies of the gene. So a Squib can like use magical equipment, but they can't actually use magic per se. But if you're saying that there was interbreeding and crossbreeding and this whole stuff was all kind of disseminated via generation by generation, you're implying a system which has many more control genes than just the one. You've got levels of magical control, not just an on-off switch. Which again makes a lot more sense if magic is something humans can do and not and human gene, the gene in control of magic, it doesn't just connect you to the computer that is in charge of magic.
Yeah, that's something that I think is more realistic, is that there's no, greater secret world government of wizards that are just sitting on the sideline letting all of the atrocities in humanity happen. Yeah, because that would be really, realistically, more and more difficult to actually keep up as technology advances.
Yeah, exactly.
But as well, it's just like...
Yeah, to just kind of collapse, the dam would collapse and magic would come flooding out into the world one way or the other.
But it also makes a lot more sense that while it is a skill that you can practice and get better at, there are some people that are just more gifted and have a higher cap to be able to achieve to magical strength, because that's just kind of how humans work in general. Like, some people are really, really good at some stuff super easily, and some people have to work really, really hard at it and will eventually surpass those people who are supernaturally gifted at it.
Yeah, well, if those supernaturally gifted people do nothing, yeah. I'm assuming it's like turning your thoughts into a certain pattern takes a certain level of skill, like, and it's
a little bit skill and a little bit of knowledge of being able to know how to do it.
Exactly, it's theory and experience, and also a little bit of a kind of a blood aspect. So maybe you've won the lottery and it's almost like it's talent, but there's 2 aspects to it. There's the skill-based talent and the genetic talent, but the genetic talent is actually just like magic bandwidth. But in theory, anybody can do it, right?
I think
in theory, anybody can do it. It's just a matter of, did you get super lucky and can do it really easily, or are you going to have to work at it a lot harder than some other people?
Exactly. Sorry, Bolas, what were you saying? We talked over you like twice.
Wouldn't be the first time. But actually no, that came off as really passive aggressive.
It's okay. It's no stress.
What I meant to say was ultimately how if every generation tries to enforce the highest possible standard for magic users, as Dustin suggested, in trying to get better magic users generation after generation. That's just an intelligence explosion, meaning that magic will fundamentally break the world 70 years later. So I'm excited for that to happen in your story.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Any magical system used correctly is going to break reality, because I hate to say the anthropic principle, but it's basically because the anthropic principle, because if you lived in a world with magic, that world would no longer exist.
Me and the besties breaking reality, hot girl shit.
Yeah.
I think that part of the thing that I was going with, because I think I might have mentioned it in some of the later tweets, is magic sort of becomes synonymous with atomic bombs. And so it's just like, hey, this is super dangerous. If we fuck around with it too much, we're going to blow up the planet. Let's just not.
I really liked, I'll just read what you've written verbatim. The Manhattan Project quickly adapted magic to their existing atomic research to maximize yield while attempting to minimize impact on a given environment, with mixed results in efficacy on both accounts. So, yeah, everything got worse, basically.
Yeah, everything got worse, and so the they were trying to make it just like radiation's really bad. Let's try to see if we can minimize that while still keeping the big boom. Fuck.
Let's be clear. In most high fantasy, well, in most fantasy, period, the main distinguishing factor of magic from the concept of technology or any sort of technology tree is its lack of adherence to known physics, or lacks its inability to fit within the known physical framework, which then by necessity implies either something. Well, no, but that's the thing, right? Other than that, other than the we don't know how it works. It's just technology. It's just another technology. So that was my other point. The fact that it not being seated well in an existing physical framework or a known physical model implies difficulty in reproducing experiments, tests, or any sort of regimented analysis of magic as a technology. And maybe that's true and maybe it's not. Maybe part of the issue is due to like an undiagnosed observer effect. Maybe part of it is being hidden by the magic users, or maybe it's failing due to active interference by other magic users who want to keep it hidden and just are extremely dedicated to sabotaging experiments.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't think about it that much, and I can't give you an answer one way or the other.
That's okay. I mean, we're here to expand upon this, not to take it as it is, right? But that's some directions that I would take this in. My magic system. Okay, Hohenheim. My magic system was kind of similar, but required merit and innate talent for particular types of magic, and most could be broken into elements, colors, and schools. And a few are categorized as colorless or unattributed magic and were a blank slate subject to greater change. A blank slate subject to greater change. And the deities of the world would grant minor to major boons to individuals based on their actions or meeting prerequisites or meeting criteria. There's a lot going on there. You've got at least four or five different dimensions to your magic system, which is probably way too many. Yeah, thanks for watching and listening along, Hohenheim. We really appreciate it. This stream is very ad hoc and very I didn't expect it to be as engaging as it is, right? And I would like to do this again to two other concepts. It's also really draining. I'll probably knock off at about the 2-hour mark. I thought I'd be able to go a bit longer, but not really.
You gotta think really hard, and you have to socialize with two individuals.
Oh yeah.
And specifically, which means we'll have to have another writing stream where you actually do the prompts.
Clearly. Oh no. I would. This is a very high level prompt construction. Let's put it that way, because this is really working from a prompt. It's just the prompt's already very well developed.
Oh, thanks.
Oh no, thank you for sharing this. I'm really enjoying looking at it because there's complexity, and again, as I said, you'd if you want to work with the historical baggage, you do have to do it justice, and it's almost two separate passes. But it's like what I said.
You have to give it like the actual writing pass, and then you have to go back and just like, is this actually correct, and or would this make sense from a historical standpoint?
Yeah, but the problem is that when it doesn't, you have to go redo your first pass again. It's like what I said to Bolas about integrating dialogue, emotion, and emotional physiological signaling of emotion. You can't do two separate passes. You have to interlace it as you go. So yes, you can start with the story pass, and then you can follow with the history pass, but then you have to switch between the two, kind of interweave them correctly, because overcorrecting each one will knock the other one out of true a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rest of it after the Manhattan Project bit, because you've got spontaneous necromantic events. Then you've got both sides magically empowered, which is basically an extinction event. you've got the Soviets tending towards folk magic, which relies on individual artisans excelling in the craft, whereas the Germans try to standardize it into rune magic, which is basically like handing out code templates or like pre-written spells to people, or getting one skilled mage to etch runes on multiple devices, which then ostensibly maintain function over time, right?
See, I feel like the Soviets,
the Germans were trying to mass produce it as like a Wunderwaffe kind of thing, is what I was thinking about. Whereas the Soviets were trying to make do with what they already had and
and
press it into
capitalize on it, and also like
could.
keep the human element, arguably.
Yeah.
I also like to
Yep.
point out it's uncharacteristic of the Soviet military not to standardize anything in this specific way. Like for example, remember socialist realism as like the standardized art.
I don't know enough about that to comment.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first thing that you said? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. So basically, it's kind of uncharacteristic of the Soviet military not to standardize this big important process because, like, for example, remember they also standardized Soviet realism as the one official art style.
That's fair. Although their military was a little bit more weird about it, but they did need to standardize on a lot of stuff simply to reduce costs on things.
My thought process is like this is like a war of survival for them. They would want to make sure they have the single best thing and then apply it to as many people as possible, especially given the resources involved in it.
I think I had mentioned, or at least had in my head, that as they are being applied, the folk magic is technically more powerful than the runic stuff. I can't remember if I do actually have that written down, but in my head, I did have that as like this one consistent thing of it's just like the folk magic, because it's better understood and is more human and isn't being mass produced to give everyone a machine gun kind of thing, is
Right.
more. It has less breakdowns in the process, so it is more. It has more efficacy and is more powerful because it is not being broken down and simplified as much as possible to be able to be cheaply mass produced.
That's fair, but I'd also pay Bolas's point in the sense that even if you do have skilled artisans and you want to rely on skilled artisans, there's nothing stopping you from attempting to prevail upon these skilled artisans to train additional skilled artisans.
That's that's fair.
And I genuinely do think that the Soviets would have actually, what am I even trying to say here? I think they would try to standardize folk magic anyway, even knowing those pieces of information. And it would catastrophically fail.
True.
It would catastrophically fail, but they would try it anyway.
That's probably fair.
The risk reward profile is kind of broken with magic in general. That's I mean, because you're dealing with the problem with magic is twofold. First of all, you're dealing with an unquantifiable weapon and a how do I put this? Something that evades understanding and by definition kind of gives you an intelligence advantage in the informational sense. But then you've got possibly remind me later, Hohenheim. It's really bad. I'm never publishing it, but I did get about 20,000 words in, and it is about animal hybrids, so it will interest you in that context. Anyways, the other problem is that by defining magic in general as a system of skills, abilities, or powers that act outside of the understanding of your known physics models and your physics system, you're either implying a much more complex system of physics that nobody completely understands, of which magic and physics are two subsets, or, significantly worse, you're implying an intersection between two physical systems. And that is, first of all, the likelihood that two physical systems could interact in that way and end up in equilibrium is basically zero. And second of all, even if it did, that equilibrium should by nature be incredibly fragile. Think of it like that 0 point energy hypothesis, where it's like, oh, if you knock matter down to too low an energy level, it'll just eat the whole universe by sucking energy into a bottomless hole. So you've got German rune magic, then you've got then the West figures it out that Magitech happens. Hey, Kyro, what brings you here? It's been ages. Basically, but not quite zero. Is it like is this in response to 0 point energy? Also, we're all hanging out in the voice channel in Mindsinger's Den. So if you want to actually hop into the discussion, be my guest, guys.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
Oh yeah. Manhattan Project adapted to do things, and they went a bit bonkers. Yes. Yeah. Thanks for popping in. Imperial Japan. So basically, the next few tweets is spread of magical knowledge and applications of magical knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And I think at a certain point, it just starts me being like, "Oh, this sounds cool," and it just
yeah, like this would be cool, and this would be neat.
Like specifically practical at beyond a point.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more there for me to draw on. I think it's mostly just that.
Yeah.
I think that this would be interesting. I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because I have too many projects, but also because it's historical fiction, and there is a level of mandated delicacy in treating historical topics, even when you get into them deeply. But I think it could be done, and I think it could be interesting. The biggest gap in this model is the magic system, but I would almost build everything else first and then come back and fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's a solid concept, and I like it a lot.
Do you think you could send me this chart thing that you've got?
Most certainly. I assume you don't have the software, so I will just send it as an image.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
You said this is not Visio, right?
This is Vizier.
Oh, okay.
I just pasted it in writing.
Yeah, I didn't particularly go over this very much because a lot of it was just applying extant knowledge that I already had, and then just applying it to the to this like just brainchild thought experiment of what if night witches were actually witches, based off of listening to a power metal song. And just exploding from there over like a day and a half, 2 days, writing shit down on my phone.
Exactly, it was a stream of consciousness thing, sort of. Kyro, the kind of key point of all this is that the nature of the magic is never defined. It's just a regiment of Soviet bombers is found to be underutilizing resources, investigated on suspicion of treason or negligence or something, and then it turns out that the people in that regiment are actually supplementing the resources with magic, either like levitate spells for planes or striking spells instead of the missiles or bullets or bombs or whatever. But then you also have the interesting question: what we came across in the upper right corner here was that, based on gender roles at the time, whether conscripted or volunteers, women were usually assigned to nurse or medical positions in field hospitals. I assume it was field hospitals. I'm kind of filling the gaps in myself.
Yeah, it was generally field hospitals. They weren't generally like field medics.
So, based on that, you've got an existing process that automatically shoehorns women, a big proportion of which, in this case, have magical powers of some description. So whatever the magic does, it is clearly of a nature that motivates people to go into offense rather than defense, even when defense is the significantly easier and more natural pathway. Oh yeah, no stress, you're more than welcome to at any point. So we don't know much about the magic, other than there is ostensibly that level of restriction on it. But then the other question is, how was it kind of... how was the knowledge of it limited? Which is something we'll get into. We got into earlier. I will post the VOD somewhere once it's done, and you're welcome to go through it at that point. I think let's leave this here because we're going from interrogating a prompt to building up a story, and that's kind of outside of the scope I wanted to tackle. But
I was about to use that exact phrasing. Holy shit!
Yeah. Which phrasing specifically?
Outside of the scope.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely gone a bit outside of the scope. So what I would like to attack next, unless someone has something specific which they want me to attack, which I would be more than happy to do. I was thinking of attacking the magic system and hold your head up high.
This is an excellent idea, and I strongly support
it. Okay.
Great.
To those unfamiliar with it, Hold Your Head Up High is one of my projects. It is my baby, and because it is my baby, I haven't touched it in years because I've wanted to get better at writing first. And this is a absolutely terrible way to handle things, so I think I'll actually start looking at it after I complete my current project, which should be a 45 to 55,000 word novella about people learning how much the world sucks from a university perspective.
Which I deeply appreciate, and I've read both that and Hold Your Head Up High and or HUYA as the acronym is. And so I after having written what he has, or after having read what he's written here for Shoulder, it is incredibly distressing to read because the protagonist is in such an amazingly complex and nightmarish bind.
Yep.
So well done there. You made me freak out.
Thank you. That's actually kind of the point, right? The entire first chapter is, and that's basically all I've written so far, is designed to very clearly illustrate the main character's position, its hopelessness, but also his emotional response to it. But I'll get to that later. I'm going to start with the magic system, and then from that, I'm going to segue into the actual story. So the magic system has a few main components. Massive spoilers for the entire trilogy of books, but I think that's kind of an open risk here. I don't think it matters too much. Okay, so the first thing that happens in the setting is that somewhere in the Dark Ages, or immediately prior to the Dark Ages, what was my reasoning? I might have to bring up my notes. I'm gonna try and make up as much of this out off the top of my head as I can. But some of the primary reasoning around this. Anyway, let me lead with the event. The event is an anti-magic monolith is created by the combined efforts of magic users and is to the sun. Congratulations. This is the main mystery of the entire trilogy. So, at a certain point, early days, as society developed and became more technological, there arose doubt as to whether magic could keep up. Because magic was relatively widespread, but it's also very... I don't really want to call it this, but I will call it this. It's kind of Ursula Le Guin magic, where it is very soft magic, and I want to intentionally keep it soft, both to preserve an air of mystery around it, but also to make it difficult to use by characters specifically. So the idea is generally the anti-magic monolith is kind of the inciting incident, but the general idea is that Earth generates mana. So Earth generates mana. Mana leaks out through people. And thus people express. Yep.
And oh no, I was gonna.
Go on.
Because magic card. It's a magic card. It's incorrect of you to refer to it in this way. No, I'm kidding.
No.
I'm gonna give you a fucking swirly bolas.
I heard none of that. Please repeat it. I'm really curious.
Oh, I said Actually, Mana Leak is a magic card. It's incorrect of you to refer to it in this way.
Directly
Wow.
into with a swirly. The pissiest toilet to give you a swirly in.
Oh my god. In this setting,
damage?
magic has always been a thing. That is correct. Until this thing was yeeted into the sun. And what this thing in the sun does, first of all, it's powered by the sun, and it's inside the sun. So it's basically inaccessible, it's basically indestructible, and you basically can't do anything about it. It was conceived as a very I really don't want to use that phrase. It was conceived as a very kind of all-encompassing a solution to the problem of magic that no one could undo intentionally. And the original intent was to protect magic users. And what it actually does is two things. It reduces the expression of mana. Magic becomes much rarer as a result. And what that means isn't necessarily that magic becomes weaker. It means that magic users become rarer, because all as mana leaks require a certain amount of pressure to form.
This does sound somewhat similar to a manga I was reading a few years ago.
Ooh, can you please give me a link? I'd be interested to hear.
I am putting it in writing as we speak.
And the other thing this thing does is it hides every expression of magic from magical users.
Oh, this looks pretty old. What year was this from?
Can I ask? Oops, sorry. Can I ask what exactly that means?
What do you mean? Which part?
Hiding the expression of magic from magic users.
Okay, so a dragon walks down the street. It knocks a car out of the way. It leaves dents in the asphalt. And it opens its wings, creates a massive gust of wind, and takes off. And the question is, what do people see and what do people remember?
Big car crash?
Sorry?
Big car crash?
Big car crash, possibly stuff falling out of the sky, possibly actually a plane crashing in the street. But what this does is it leads to some really, really weird situations, because this thing automatically works to reconcile experienced events, whatever's left behind afterwards, or if the magical creature or whatever magical caused the problem sticks around, then you obviously factor that in. But the end result, the initial and final conditions have to match. But your memory of the event as it happens may not necessarily be the same as your memory of the event afterwards, if a better memory can be edited in afterwards with the complete information of the event.
So it's not hiding magic from magic users, it's hiding magic from non-magical people.
Yes, and I'm an idiot. Fixed. Thank you for asking the question.
So it's your basic veil in terms of like fantasy tropes.
It is, but it's not. Most veils in most fantasy tropes are implied to be static. This is a dynamic hallucination system.
Ah, I like it.
And it shifts to like least work required at every step, which results in some really weird experiences sometimes. So that's that. So this is the main issue, right? So society is developing and this thing is in place and nobody cares about it. It is a fact of life that magic is concealed from non-magic users and nobody knows why. No real record was made of this, and if there was, it's not accessible to the general populace. However, okay, so one more thing comes from this. Somewhere in the past, okay, so the magic used to be common. Magic used to be common enough that magic users interacted relatively frequently and could kind of form consensuses on things and have a cultural take on the whole concept of magic. But then, when magic became less common, magic users by necessity broke up into smaller tribes, covens. Like maybe there's 15 or 20 magic users in Victoria, Australia, as opposed to the original hundreds or thousands. And they seek each other out. They band together because of one main reason, and this reason is because people express particular characteristics of mana. Human magic users, note the emphasis, are only able to use one school of magic. The concept of school of magic is open to interpretation, but it can't be distorted beyond a certain point.
So, like pyromancy, hydromancy, etc.
Exactly.
Okay.
But you would not usually have things as clearly defined as pyromancy or hydromancy because those things are dependent on physics in a separate degree. They're not pure concepts. They interact with the physical substance on a certain level. The main character,
so more like a neuromancy that works purely based on the mind, like illusion and so on.
Yeah, exactly. But if you have illusion, you have illusion, and that's your focus. So covens are a design response to having to function as magic users with a broad set of skills when people are restricted to specific magical skills.
Okay.
You have designed teams of 5 or 6 people with different specializations who cover for each other's weaknesses. Think of it like the tank DPS healer combinations in MMOs or RPGs, but a lot more specific and thus a lot harder to make coherent teams out of. So let's say you've got a group of 3 people and one of them is, and I think this was what I haven't read the original chapter in a while or my notes, but the original group of 3 people who are members of this coven have the following magical specializations. One is a binder, one is an illusionist, and one had something to do with informational linking as a concept. Think of it like telepathy with extra steps.
Kind of like a synergist?
Sorry?
Like a synergist where they can help people mediate between each other with the mind?
Yeah, essentially, but like just facilitating the transfer of information in various ways.
So more like a communication.
Yeah. And you'll notice that I emphasized human magic users.
Yes.
Creature magic users
are far less restricted.
Yeah,
and,
are not limited by school.
And you would know, you fucking fluffo.
Oh yeah, 100%. I have personal experience with all this. I'm secretly magic. No, I wish.
Secretly, actually, just a real dragon.
Oh, hey, I could be.
What do you mean?
What do you mean? On the internet, nobody knows you're a cat.
Exactly. Well, except I'm totally a cat. I mean, look at this.
So fluffy. Don't joke my way.
Something pseudo dragon. Something Dungeons and Dragons.
Something. No comment. So as the frequency of magic users, the prevalence of magic users decreased, and they've collapsed into tribalism. The tentative cooperation that was present between human and non-human magic users kind of collapsed. And the thing about how do I put this? Magic is heritable by default. But that was the case.
Okay.
That was only the case back when there was enough magic to go around. As it is, following the implementation of the artifact, magic is basically only occurs through leaks and is essentially no longer heritable. Like you can inherit maybe a little bit of magic, but you can't get the amount of magic that would be necessary to force a leak, a mana leak, the way it used to happen. So you'll get like hedge witches, you'll get like spiritual healers, but they'll be relatively weak on the whole.
So they'll have a spark of magic, but not like a flame.
Exactly. Think minor levitation, the like matchboxes and stuff, rather than actual applied spells.
The best kind of magic.
You would need 2 parents who are strong magic users to produce another magic user.
Yeah, and even then they'd be quite weak. The only reliable way to get magic is for it to randomly happen by leaking through from the substrate of the magic produced by the earth, which is actively being drained by this artifact.
So, like, places of power, like
Yep.
you would find in The Witcher, for instance.
Yep.
That makes sense.
But not even places of power. Like ley lines are a thing, but they're not much of a thing now that the Earth's magic is mostly suppressed.
Yeah. So
Like ley lines are a thing the same way heritable magic is a thing. It's there, but it's not significant.
Yeah, so it would have to be random, spontaneous instances.
Yeah.
Like a random weakening in the veil, which could
Exactly.
with time.
Exactly, and the pressure comes out in different spots, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, so you've established the difference between human and animal magic users. Tell us about the part where you become a dragon. Tell us about the TF. That's I know you want.
Okay.
I have a legitimate question on this.
Yep.
Are the already extant covens on the lookout for other very powerful magic users that are born?
Yes. That's the main method of recruitment.
They're just keeping an eye out for kids doing really weird shit and then like befriending them.
Yes,
So
if they have to. If you can get someone with the right combination of spells or the right magical vertical, you can actually have them keep an eye out for mana leaks and go to the location and basically confront the person immediately before they can go off and do their own thing.
Gotcha.
Sure.
Children catching. Let's go.
This coven. It's not always children. It's basically age independent.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to be born into it. You can inherit it by just randomly getting hit by magic.
You basically can't be born into it. You have to randomly get hit by magic now that the magic is restricted.
Gotcha.
So you have to meet the criteria, which is exposure.
Yeah, essentially, and there's basically no way to control that. But it is predictable.
I misunderstood.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm kind of clarifying my own thoughts as I'm talking about this. So, it is predictable, but only for a short time in advance and only with the exact right toolset. So this coven that we're dealing with, in the story, I've called it the Coven of the Red Sand Glass. Name subject to change.
One thing I also wanted to ask. Oh wait.
Yep.
Fuck. I already forgot. Never mind.
Was it about the Dragon TF?
No, not specifically. Okay, let me get back to you on this. Oh, my bad.
No, it's all good. It's all good. If you want to ask me without interrupting, just type it in chat. I feel like you're waiting for me to finish talking, and that never happens.
Oh no, I don't think it was that specific thing. Fuck, I forgot.
Oh. Okay, so the thing about the magic users drifting out into tribalism is that the communication between the human and non-human magic users collapses. And there is one reliable way you can increase your level of power. Two ways, in fact, but one doesn't actually increase your power, one just increases your versatility, and that's finding new spells. And spell work in this setting is a combination, essentially, of finding existing spells or things that could work as spells and adapting them to your own use cases. So you can find an occult book that just, I mean, yeah, yes, but they're located in Melbourne. That's why they're the Coven of the Red Sand Glass, because time is passing and also red sands and da-da-da. It had symbolism. I came up with it in like 10 seconds flat. And I'll probably revise it later, or I might keep it. We'll see. So anyway, other than expanding your spell repertoire by basically reading crazy pseudo-magical texts and adapting parts of them that work for you, parts of them that resonate with you, or that happen to match your the sliver of magic, the magical discipline that you can control, you can steal other people's magic. You can't steal all of it, and you can't steal it super reliably, but with a cleverly designed ritual, you can steal some proportion of someone's magic.
Remembered what I was going to say. So what you could do is because it's random, you could have the process be extremely traumatic, and majority of the people don't survive the process.
I could, but I don't have to because magic supply is already restricted. I am working with Heller to come up with a sequel trilogy concept, or at least a sequel book for after the end of this trilogy. That has to deal with magic coming back into the world, and at that stage, yes, that concept might be very useful.
Okay, very good.
I had honestly, at first read you can steal other people's magic as diablerization from the World of Magic. Where a vampire eats another vampire, and if they eat a vampire of an older, more powerful generation, they gain all of its strength.
Correct, but it results in the victim's death. Second of all, you don't gain all the power, you gain a fraction. And third of all, it doesn't have to be more powerful than you. It can be any power, and you just get a bit. Not necessarily with diminished returns. It's just diminishing returns because if you're draining people of the same magical strength and your strength grows over time, yes, it's a diminishing proportion, but it's not necessarily diminishing returns otherwise, not in an absolute sense. And the problem is that there aren't many magic users left, and every magic vertical, every magic discipline is precious, and if you want to synergize them well, you have to basically respect every magic user you come across because you don't know when they'll come in useful. Isn't it convenient that there's an entire category of magic users that can be conveniently dehumanized?
Uh-oh.
So, the Coven of the Red Sand Glass, through a list of a sequence of serendipitous events, ends up with someone with a binding magical specialization, and someone with the ability to detect forthcoming magical leaks. And when the protagonist of the book does randomly turn into a dragon in the middle of the night, he wakes up already trapped in a binding circle by this coven who have tracked him down ahead of time, basically stolen him as he was knocked unconscious by the process, and put him under a series of extremely strict orders and commands in order to just have the coven control him. Because people hunt magical creatures all the time, but usually nobody's dumb enough to actually try to conscript one or subvert one. And like with the old fantasy dragons of a few decades ago in mainstream fantasy, while dragons are generally considered to be amoral and, well, not amoral, but morally incompatible with humans, and kind of on a certain level evil and threats. I mean, you're not wrong. There is a clear acknowledgement that they're intelligent. They're just maliciously intelligent. So that's kind of the perception. people have of magical creatures. And so they happen to be blessed with the set of skills required to actually subvert this guy, and they decide, let's put him under so many bindings he can't basically scratch his ass without permission. Then we're gonna teach him all of the magic and wield him as a weapon. And
there's no possible way this could go wrong.
No possible way this could go wrong. No. So the focus of the story is actually the relationship between this guy and the binder, because she's the main one controlling him. It's incredibly one-sided and really messed up, and I'm going to try to not go too deep into certain topics, but there are going to be a few things which are going to happen, even if they're not going to be particularly well highlighted. And it's just it's basically a huge mess, and it ends with him. I originally conceived this idea with the desire to have him break out through a loophole, but I got so good at formulating orders and restrictions that he's going to have to break out by emotionally subverting the binder. So they're going to actually end up in a really weird relationship where he's going to basically convince her or talk her into letting him go. At which point he kills the entire coven, possibly including her, possibly not. That's going to depend on how the relationship develops, which I haven't established the details of yet. So that's book one. He's bound. He learns magic. He forms a relationship, a very one-sided kind of abusive relationship in different ways on both ends. He's released. He destroys the coven, and he moves on. Then book two. The focus of book two is him establishing a network of magical creatures who are usually hunted down very quickly or left kind of lonely and individual and without support, or just hunted by animal control or whatever. Because sometimes the most convenient template for a magical creature is a massive bird or a bear and not a human. And then he builds up a bit of a network, and there's some politicking between the magical creatures and the covens and that sort of things. And then book three is reforming a tentative corporation and deciding to, because as much as back in the Middle Ages, hiding magic and hiding magical creatures might have helped them, in modern society there's so few places for magical creatures to live or for covens to function with magic unnoticed, that they basically come to the decision that, okay, maybe it's time for this artifact to go and for magic to come back. And the main goal of book three and of the trilogy as a whole is destruction of the artifact within the sun.
God, I can't see of any possible way of that going particularly well for life on Earth.
Oh, no.
Fucking around with the shit inside the sun is going to kind of necessarily, I feel like, be a fucking mess.
Oh, you destroy this thing, and basically everybody on Earth gets magic at once, sometimes in pretty extreme ways. But that's a matter for the sequel.
I'm just talking about, like, destroying the thing inside of the sun, fucking with the sun. That's what I'm concerned about.
Oh, that's also a possible concern and something they'll have to account for.
Hey, if we drop this bomb on Japan, are we gonna set the whole fucking atmosphere on fire? Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. Yes, I mean exactly hourglass, but sandglass seemed more poetic, so I went with that.
This is why you're really, really good at coming up with plots, and I do appreciate that you actually do try to finish the stories you write, and even through all the nesting of concepts. And I also do really want to say that I appreciate the majority of your work is about dragons and or TF, which, you know.
I have a type. I don't hide this. But yes,
I'm eternally grateful.
Oh.
Instead of the writer's barely disguised fetish, it's the writer's undisguised fetish.
Yeah, exactly. Just the key is to not actually make it a fetish. Just make it a characteristic of the setting. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But yeah, I do like my complex plots. Actually, I'll mostly leave this here because so yeah, that's the basic outline. I've gotten a few ideas out of this, which I'll have to review the VOD for because I definitely came up with some of what I just said off the cuff instead of remembering it from earlier. And thank you guys for listening while I fleshed out my setting at you.
Nah, dude, it was fucking fun. You helped me out with my shit, kind of unintentionally. I don't know.
You sent me a good setting. I enjoyed that. But what I want to do now, I want to show one more thing, probably before we knock off, because it's getting past the 2-hour mark. Unless someone has something they want me to look at, a prompt or a quick prompt or a quick question, or just, oh, you know what? After this, I'll just open up Q&A about setting design in general and try and answer questions about that. But there is one more thing I wanted to show off, and it is.
You have a selfie of yourself actually being a real dragon, don't you, dude?
What? No, if I had that, I wouldn't share it. What are you, nuts?
That's a good way to get snatched up by the CIA for random bullshit.
Exactly. Welcome to the timeline for Extempore.
What is Extempore?
Extempore is a time travel story that I will write someday, maybe, if I have time. And the key concept of it is set in a high fantasy world. And there are two main protagonists. There is the Dragonborn who can travel back in time upon death, a handful of hours. And there is the human mage who can travel to arbitrary times, but not the amount of time he can travel is limited by the resources he has on hand and the preparation he has and all that. Like, so how powerful a spell one can cast in the basic sense. So what happens is the Dragonborn uses his travel back in time on death power to become scarily competent at fighting and other things, and this is his life. Okay, so this set of timelines.
Autosave.
Sorry?
You gotta love autosave in an action RPG.
Yeah, it's essentially, but it's a little more complex than that. Well, no, he makes it a little more complex than that. But yeah, you've got this set of timelines on the left, which are his original life, and then he eventually nails things down well enough to become immortal and live a decent amount of time. And then we have the other guy who happens much later in the timeline, and whose time travel research is repeatedly hampered by this thing or creature or legend from thousands of years ago. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to travel back in time and solve the problem at its source. And the story opens with the Dragonborn getting apprehended by the Emperor's forces for absolutely no reason. And what happens over time is basically these two guys interact with each other, but because their time travel works in such different ways, there are a few sequences of events which can result in edge cases. And because of the way not only their specific time travel spells, but also time in general and time travel in general works, eventually they lock themselves into an endless loop.
Oh.
And then other stuff happens, but that would be massive spoilers that I'm actually not willing to share because it's too good. I'm too happy with this. But yeah, the core concept is two conflicting types of time travel locking the world into an endless loop. But yeah, the reason I wanted to show this off was because I was trying to come up with this in my head and it seemed kind of neat, but then I was like, okay, so how did things actually happen that way? If I want to open with a scene that is the result of one person time traveling repeatedly to a degree that they become basically an ageless immortal, going forward in time the slow way 5,000 years, triggering someone else to do time travel research or trying to prevent them, and then resulting in that person trying to go back in time 5,000 years to solve the problem at its source, and then having the opening scene of the book, I should at least have timelines for all of that stuff so I understand how the present came about and what the motivations of the characters are, as well as their experiences. So, of these timelines, all written in black, see this bit of green text?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we see it.
Yep. That happens on screen.
Only that happens on screen.
Yes.
All right, that's your entire book there.
No. This is book one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to timeline a trilogy, and then write excerpts of it, so it's only one book. But hopefully it still makes sense. This is going to be an amazing design project, and I'm going to hate it. But the concept is too good to pass.
Dude, this sounds like fucking hell.
Oh yeah. Fortunately, I do software development for a living, which is basically the same thing.
Why would you do this to yourself more?
I came up with a really good idea. I could not resist. So book one is the Dragonborn and his life. Book 2 is the response of the mage and their interactions. At the end of book 2, the world is locked into an endless loop, and then book 3 has the resolution to that. But yeah, that's this is another one of my babies, and one that I'm particularly happy with on the concept stage. But it'll have to wait a while, unfortunately.
My question about the endless loop, is it that the time traveler from fuck it. Is the endless loop that the time traveler from the future is the one giving the Dragonborn his time traveling powers and then causing his own fucking problem?
No, that would be a complete time loop. No, what I mean is that by endless loop, I mean at a certain point the two of them screw up in such a way that it resets the world to an earlier state.
Oh.
It's actually an endless causal loop. Okay, and the reason this happens is the world has no memory of time travel. You only have the present state of things. Think of it as the universe being rolled back in state every time you time travel backwards. So
which is interesting because it means there's no actual time travel.
Exactly. Well, it depends who you ask, right? What is time travel really, if not just state restoration? Well, you're right.
Quick loading.
Sorry?
Quick saving and quick loading.
Yeah,
like,
well,
realistically, that's basically, even fucking in some video games, it's canonically just like, oh yeah, you're just traveling back in fucking time to fix the thing that you fucked up.
Essentially, yeah. But yeah, there's an edge case where what happens when the second time traveler travels back to a specific spot, and then the first time traveler travels back past that spot. When they re-experience it, the second time traveler no longer appears because that information isn't stored in the in memory. So if you time travel back past the appearance of a time traveler, it erases that and also everything that happened to cause it.
Meaning people are dying over and over again.
Are they? I mean, yeah. That's what rollback means. Like, the time travel has never been a particularly neat process, and this one is particularly poorly implemented for reasons. But yeah, so basically something like that happens, and events actually end up trapped in like cyclical repetition.
Okay, so just because I have difficulties with hypotheticals sometimes, so time traveler B time travel into a point further back than time traveler A. Does time traveler B cease to exist, or does time traveler A cease to exist?
Depends what you mean. Okay, so time traveler A is born at a certain point, right? And
like,
then,
in this scenario, like, the time traveler A, does it time travel back to that point, or does time traveler B not time travel back to that point because of time traveler A existing?
Okay, in order to answer that question, I'm gonna have to further flesh out your scenario. So time traveler A is born at point 1. Time traveler B is born at point 2. Time traveler A goes through life normally, and occasionally time travels back short amounts of time to resolve specific problems. Time traveler B eventually time travels back to, let's say, point 1.1, which is between 1 and 2, right? And he makes plans of some sort, and then he stages an attack on time traveler A. Time traveler A time travels back from point 1.2 to point 1.15. And then that keeps happening, right? Because time traveler B arrived at point 1.1. But then, eventually, time traveler A time travels past point 1.1 to point 1.09. Then when he goes back into the future through point 1.1, time traveler B no longer appears there.
So, okay. Time traveler A, time traveling further back in time, changes events or causes certain events that would have happened previously to not happen because of the universe not remembering that the time traveling had occurred in the first place because he'd already gone past that point. So time traveler B doesn't show up at that point.
Don't think of it as not remembering. I think when I said not remembering, I messed things up a bit. Okay, so let me try to draw this. We've got time traveler A and time traveler B. So what happens when you time travel is... Okay, first of all, let's establish causality. The causality, the what caused A and B is that they both have parents, right? And time travel doesn't affect that. The parents had a kid, the kid exists. Now, let's say B goes back in time. When B goes back in time, they go back in time a specific amount, and then from this point, I've just thought of how to draw it. So.
No worries, the graph is genuinely going to be very helpful for me because
No, of course.
I'm having difficulty visualizing it.
There's a reason I plotted the story out in Vizier, my friend. The graph is necessary. Okay, so this is the main timeline, and I will mark it as such. So is this. But the key thing about time traveling back from point B is it rolls the world back. And when you roll the world back, this has no longer occurred. So this happens, you get to B. B travels back to point point 1, we have point 2, and then here we have point 1.6, let's say. Okay, so you travel back to 1.6, the world is rolled back to 1.6, and from 1.6 the world continues. So you appear at point 1.6 out of nowhere, and then the world proceeds as usual. Your parents have an alternative version of you, da 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 da. So that's how time traveler B works. Time traveler A, his mind time travels back into his body. Time traveler B time travels physically. That's the other distinction that kind of helps cause the infinite loop, when those two different ways of travel interact in just the wrong way.
Okay.
So the reason B is erased when A time travels is that, let's say B makes it to point 2. Then he travels back. He's cottoned onto the fact that A is a problem, decides to travel back to point 1.1 and solve the problem. This then splits this timeline again. Well, not splits it, but rolls this segment up back, right? So not only is this rolled back, the other one is also. So you travel back to 1.1. And the world continues as normal. You have normal causality. Then A takes exception. Let's say really A takes exception at say 1.1.2. And decides to travel back to point 1.05. Then causality proceeds. So the thing about traveling back from point 1.2 to point 1.05 is that B initially appeared at 1.1, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're traveling forward from 1.05 along a linear time, there is no time traveler here.
Gotcha.
Because the time traveler comes from the future, which has since been rolled back. And when you're the cause of the future being rolled back, then you appear in the past. But if you're not the cause of the future being rolled back, then there's no reason for the present to include you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But then if A didn't have the memory that they had of this event happening at 1.0, 1.2 to 1.05, if they didn't remember this, because A only remembers, we've got this entire plot, which is B time traveling back and forth, right? But all that A has seen of it is just this little bit here. Oops. This is all A has seen. This is A's life was 1, and then from here, because 1.1 traveled here. Well, actually, no, not this. Actually, A has seen this. A has seen this error and this error. That's the entirety of A's experience. All of this may as well not have happened. They've just someone's appeared at 1.1. As far as A is concerned, B always appeared at 1.1. So then they travel past back from 1.2 to 1.05 to better prepare for B. But then B never happens because B happened from this entire counterfactual future that now no longer exists.
Okay.
I got all that.
think I'm starting to understand, yeah.
I got the vast majority of that, but then my question is like,
how am I going to show that in a novel without exploding people's heads? I don't know.
Well, not only that, but also like, how does B then realize it again?
How does what? Sorry, say that again.
How does B realize it once they cease to exist? Like,
they
how,
don't.
How does the next? Yeah.
They don't cease to exist. They just don't proceed to have gone back at that point in time.
Yeah, well, it's not that they cease to exist. They don't start to exist.
Right.
But then when A travels forward over time, B is born at this point. That's still canon. That still happens. It's still independent. Unless A does something about B's parents, which would require them to know B's identity, which may not be obvious.
Right. Sounds good.
And yeah, there's a lot of back and forth is the thing. But eventually, yeah, they get caught in a snarl. So yeah, this is a huge train wreck, and I look forward to working on it.
So, just to clarify for the point.
Yep.
B doesn't retain the memories of having gone back to 1.1 because from A's point of view, B never came back to that point. Well, because in actuality, B never came back to that point, so B doesn't have the memories of going back to that point.
B did come back to that point, and then that arrival got rolled back.
Yes, but does the rolling back retain the memories of B doing that in the future, and it just leads to like this really bad deja vu feeling?
No.
Okay.
Complete rollback. Just whatever the state the world was in 1.05, plus whatever mind, body, or vehicle enacted the rollback is just run as normal in linear time from that point onward.
It feels like one of these two individuals has significantly more power than the other.
Correct, but which one?
I feel like it'd be A, because
Yes,
he
is
has
more
the
powerful.
ability.
Wait, no, I don't know who said what, but come on, guys, talk it out. I want to hear this.
I feel like A would be more powerful because A has the ability to actually retain his memories of future events, whereas B cannot retain the memory of events that have not happened because A rolled back the timeline beyond when B had intercepted.
That is correct after a fashion, sir.
Also, A may have been born first, so there may have been more available power at that point, making them potentially stronger.
Oh no, this is a different setting.
Rip.
So A is born earlier, and that gives them the advantage of being born earlier, which in time travel is nothing to sneeze at. Then A travels back mentally and B travels back physically. So the advantage A has over B in this specific scenario is that B is acting before his birth and A is acting after his birth. So B can erase A in just the same way, but A is still going to be there in person, right? If A were to time travel back from 1.2 to 1.05 and then go all the way back forward to B, and then B goes back in time again, and then for some reason B goes back to 1.02, then B exists at 1.02, but the A from 1.05 no longer remembers the future because that travel didn't happen. So this goes in both ways. The advantage A has over B is mostly condensed to having been born first.
It's the being able to be born first, but also the physical memory of being able to travel back in time, while also using that to potentially roll back any injuries he may have sustained at the hands of B. Outside of, like, potential psychoses that may have been developed, which
would
even
compound
in
over
that
time.
case,
Yeah.
yes, would compound over time unless they were directly related to chemical imbalances in the brain.
Correct. Which there's a hybrid of the two, and I think I tackled both in the timeline. But that is definitely a consideration. I've completely lost my train of thought. This topic is really complex.
Time travel is bullshit.
It is. But it's fun bullshit, unfortunately.
I've been having fun discussing this hypothetical thing, but I definitely feel like even just beyond the A is born first kind of thing, A being able to roll back any potential, so to speak, battle damage is a strength in and of itself to B, as well as being able to roll back with his memories, whereas B, because of A rolling back with his memories and being able to know more or less the exact points more readily than B would be able to, because B would have to be working out of a history book or something.
Yeah,
which
or
isn't
out
necessarily as correct.
Or out of trial and error. But yeah, look, A has the advantage of being born first. Memory overrides are sort of balanced, except A is more conversant with them, and B requires expensive rituals. B can cooperate with himself. A cannot. B can generate copies of himself and induct them into his little time travel adventure. A is just stuck in the one body, overwriting his past self. Which also means that B can travel back to before his birth, but A cannot. Unless he steals and applies B's method.
Which would just make A twice as powerful as B, necessarily.
Correct, until he fucked up and overwrote himself, or B overwrote him, or rolled back something, or... It's like... That's the thing, right? You can definitely gain power, but all it takes is someone traveling back to before your landing spot, and you're gone.
So... I guess it's kind of an edge case thing, but would the traveling back in time with himself not necessarily overwrite one of the two of them?
Who are you talking about?
Like, okay, so say B makes B-2,
Yep.
If B works with B-2 to both go back in time to, jump A from out of bushes and steal his fucking lunch money.
Yep.
Would that rolling back beyond B-2's initial split point cause B-2 to not have come into existence in the first place?
Well, it's not really a split point. Don't think of it as a split point. B travels back in time physically. Yes. And thus he remains B, and he creates a new timeline in which his default self is B-2. And then he can interact with his other self, and they can just plan or something. Because this timeline has no consistency, it has no need to enforce loops. It's a rollback and a reprocessing. So by interacting with your past self, you don't break anything. However, I believe that my intention was always to only allow individual time travel back, and I see no reason to change that. So even if the two of them cooperated, the moment one of them went back in time, the other one would effectively be rolled back. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about. It's just like they could work together, but the most that they could do is talk to each other. Realistically, they can't time travel because that would cause one of the two of them to no longer function.
All they can do really is research more efficiently.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
What if A and B become lovers? I think that I can't remember, but I think that in my notes I've actually got B as a distant descendant of A. Like, literally 6,000 years later.
What if A and B became lovers? Then I guess Alabama.
Yeah.
Sweet home Alabama.
Well, there's so many other things happen in the interim that I think it would barely count. But no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, realistically, I think 6,000 years of separation
and
is
genetic
far
drift.
enough separation for it to not realistically matter.
Exactly. Yeah, and yet I'm still not doing it.
Yeah, no, that's very fair.
Oh no, that's terrible. I love it. He posted a meme in the Discord.
Uh-oh. Christ.
But yeah. All right. I'm gonna fold this up. I'll save this later. And yeah. Questions, comments, anything else anybody wanted to bring up before we finish up for the day?
This was fucking great. You should do this more.
Oh, thank you. And thanks very much for popping in and participating in the conversation. Thank you also to Bolas and Hohenheim for dropping in. And absolutely. Thanks very much both Bolas and Dustin for providing some really solid material for me to work off. That was a lot of fun to review and to go through.
I would like to also agree with Dustin about this being a ton of fun. I really do want to thank you again for reviewing my work. So about that, we reviewed the first half. When you get the time, and I do not think this will take very long for you, could I get you to also review the first half, please?
Oh, certainly. I can't promise anything faster than a week, but I can definitely look at it offline.
That is more than fun.
Cheers. Yeah, no problem. You gotta tell us about that. Okay. I should really remove stretch time or make it a Beat Saber only thing. It's way better in full body tracking. Oh. Wait, does that come through the microphone?
I heard something fucking pop, and it sounded like it was your spine.
Probably, yeah. I twisted my neck a bit. But yeah, I might. Look, I'll definitely do this again. I will probably queue up content ahead of time. Next time I do this, and I'll probably do it once every month or two, I think.
Yeah, having stuff to go ahead of time is probably a lot better than semi-scrambling at the last minute, just like, oh yeah, two of my buddies donated shit.
Hey, let's
work off of this.
This is why we called it the experimental writing stream. The next one will just be called writing stream.
Yeah,
because it'll be prompts and whatnot.
Yeah, to distinguish it from the off the rails trash fire that this one threatened to become before I got a handle on what I was doing.
Oh, this is fucking great.
Oh, I had a lot of fun too. I'd definitely do this again. But yeah, I also have I also want to do. I've got it as a follower goal. The Fluffy Dragon versus Unity. A game. I want to get into game dev and music production because game dev is relatively easy to stream, but I know very little about Unity, and I still need to learn. On the other hand, music production I know a decent amount about, but that's really hard to stream and to set up correctly. So that'll take a lot of experimentation to actually do things. Honestly, I'm tempted to. I don't know. I might even like stream on multiple accounts at once. I don't know how I'd do it, but I would need to show like 2 or 3 different viewpoints to cover everything that was happening. So either I'll get very good at keyboard shortcut switching between viewpoints, or I'll just have to come up with something else.
That would be nightmarish to watch as a viewer.
Well, I don't know. Depends, because I have to focus one screen for the digital audio workstation. I'd love to orient a camera on the Eurorack if I could. And then there's a few more things that need to be included in frame. So yeah, it's the gift that keeps. There's a reason I haven't done music production streaming on Twitch before, and that's because it is a nightmare. And half the time I try to get it working, I actually get stymied on literally just routing audio out of the door into OBS. It's very difficult. But yeah, it's on my bucket list, and someday maybe we'll get it running.
I'm proud of you for how amazingly talented and diligent you are. Except for the multiple concepts at once part, but we're just gonna ignore that.
That's okay. I used to have do everything there is time. I feel like I've comfortably given up on any possibility of getting everything I ever wanted to do done. And I'm just gonna have to settle for doing a couple of things, and but that's good because I have so many things to choose from now. I get to pick the best ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see how we go. Oh, thanks for the prime, Dustin. Much appreciated.
You are quite welcome.
Yeah. I regret this a lot less than I feared I might. Back at the time. And yeah, thanks everyone for helping make this an actual success, and I'll definitely do it again when the time rolls around.
Happy to have donated my train wreck of a thing. Well, train wreck as in I lost the train of thought and it crashed kind of thing.
That's all of us all the time. That's fine. That's what we get for tackling actual complexity. So yeah, let me transition to outro. Make sure that I can still talk and we can keep talking. 1 moment, please. All right. So you should be able to still hear everything. Let me just turn down outro. Okay, that should be relatively better.
Yeah, probably.
Yep. We don't have Fluffer. Wait, do we have Fluffer? No.
Fluffer's...
Oh yeah, we do. He's just invisible. There we go. Here we go. Fluffer's back. Wait, I need to. There we go. Okay, now Fluffer's back. Okay. So yeah. I don't really have much to add at this point, other than it was a great time, and I'm really hungry. Huh?
It was fucking fantastic. The reason I asked for the chart outline Visio thing for my specific alt history thing that I was doing is because just talking about it and elaborating on it, and elaborating on it as we were, genuinely made me think of it just like, oh, I should like realistically continue that a little bit.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it's easy to run into writer's block when you're trying to pursue a combination of a specific idea and a specific goal, but once you're willing to kind of release your grip on it a bit and actually go, okay, let's explore the implications of the stupid assumptions that I've made, it's really easy to organically develop most ideas into surprisingly functional beasts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very fair, because like having 2 other people who are far more proficient writers than me actually ask me questions about like, how does this work? What was your plans with it? And me being like, well, I don't know what my plans were with it, but I think realistically, with further knowledge and 2 years of hindsight, I think this would make more sense. Or I think this is what I was going for, but I can't guarantee it.
But, like, it doesn't even matter, right? Because in the context, you have the information, you have this question, you have this, either an inconsistency or a gap or just blank space that you can fill. And even just working from the information you have at the moment, you can go, okay, we have these 3 or 4 options, we can emphasize specific aspects of them depending on what we want to develop and how. And suddenly you've got, like, ways forward, right?
Yeah, because specifically one thing that you mentioned as, like, a specific kind of plot hole, realistically.
Yep.
That I had been, even as we kept going, I'm just like, why is that? Why is it specifically Osiyovit's fortress? And I think the 2, like, possibilities that I came up with is just that it was specifically the level of gas, or whatever kind of weird gas you use, combined with the other kind of just specific circumstances surrounding that engagement that led to the attack of the dead men, or it was that, as well as it being specifically World War I and how much of a hellhole and just how much death existed at one point in time caused by man-on-man violence, and combined with the Russian desire to just hold this fortress for just a little bit longer, just to lead into that little bit of necromantic stuff. I mean, continuing onward.
That's fair, but then, like, that's my whole issue with the concept, right? Is that
that would have happened all along the fucking lines, wouldn't
exactly. Human suffering isn't unique. Atrocities happen all the time, and most of them are underdocumented, usually via vested interest. And like Hohenheim said earlier, the Aztecs were pretty terrible, and if you're being ritually sacrificed to a sun god, you're going to have incentive to do something, and eventually a large enough or a directed enough group is going to come up with the coordination to do that, and it's not even going to be rare, it's going to be at least twice a century.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But then, you get the additional option of not necessarily including or documenting these events, but you can include their aftermath and the scars they left on the Earth. You end up with something like the Zone from the Roadside Picnic. You get this whole area of distorted physics affected by some past tragedy and the resolution to it that the distressed or oppressed people came up with the lack of any other option. But yeah.
That is definitely something that is entirely undeveloped by me, because it's just like, oh wow, yeah, the Battle of Osiyovit's fortress back in World War I was really fucking cool.
Fair enough.
How like just one company of dude turned back like an entire army corps of the German military because they looked like they were fucking zombies coming out of their graves to come attack the German military, and they all just freaked the fuck out and ran away.
Christ. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You know that every story starts with an idea like that. Like, you're never going to finish a book on any topic if you don't think that the topic is really cool.
Yeah.
Because writing is hard, man. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of revision, and it's something that people underappreciate. It takes a lot of design work. It's I made the meme as a jerk, but writing really is, in a certain respect, engineering. You're engineering a setting, a story, and a sequence of events, and unlike history, where you find tattered pages and try to piece them together, and shit happens that make absolutely no sense because people get, like, crazy strength or amazing luck, the thing about fiction is that everything has to make sense, and that's a more major restriction than people think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fair. This was like just me attaching one cool thing from actual history onto the other thing that is like, oh, that'd be cool. What if I elaborate upon that and apply it retroactively to this one thing?
Right, but that's the thing. You got to start somewhere, and if your start is good enough to carry you through an entire concept or entire novel, then well, if you've got an idea good enough to carry you, let it carry you. Just make sure you do it justice by interrogating the shit out of it in the process.
Yeah, and thinking on that, I think realistically, if I were to continue elaborating on that story, I would have to necessarily either tone down the importance of Osteovich or just not mention it at all, because again, that would be something that realistically would have happened significantly more commonly throughout history.
Don't overcommit to that.
Often.
Don't overcommit to that, because just because the nature of the event itself may not be uncommon doesn't mean the characters know this. It's quite possible that Osteovich is the first resurgence of such an event in X years. Well, it's okay, maybe not because World War One, but the first recorded such event in a long time, and people were like, okay, why did this happen? And maybe this is what kicks off research into historical events, which then leads to the discovery of these scars. Like, just because the world works a certain way does not mean that the people you're writing about have to know about this. Just you have to know about this because when they start messing around with eldritch forces that nobody should touch, you need to know what happens in a logical sense. But they by no means have to understand what they're doing or how things must unfold.
Yeah, the people in the story shouldn't necessarily be omniscient on everything because they're not God. I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Do-do-do, da-da-da-da-da-da. Man, that song slaps.
Well, Hohenheim, with the whole thing of how I was going about it, is that magic wasn't super common knowledge outside of, like, really poor, tight-knit rural communities. Because another thing that had inspired that specific section of it was a podcast that I was listening to, that I do still occasionally listen to, at the time, where that is also kind of the truth, but it does lead more into eldritch stuff, called Old Gods of Appalachia, where a lot of the, like, folk rituals and magics and that kind of stuff is a definite thing because of the old gods in the dark buried underneath the Appalachian Mountains in the United States of America.
And I would like to, and I think that's a great place to leave off for tonight, because it's
Probably, otherwise we'll be here forever.
Yeah.
I apologize, I could talk people's ear off.
No, it's good. That was the whole concept behind this thing, right?
And I would like to thank you both very much. Shoulder, thank you for your amazing writing and critique. And Dustin, I'm very glad to have seen the tweets again and explored it in such an explosive, graph way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like diagramming a concept as you interrogate it, because then you don't have to keep it all in mind at once. You can go, what if this, and suddenly, 20 boxes, right? But yeah, no, thank you, all three of you for hopping in the chat. Thank you guys for contributing, and thanks for just engaging with the concept. I thought it was had the chance to be cool, and I'm glad I was proven right.
Have a good night.
Oh yeah, it was fucking great.
All the best, guys. Until next time. I can wave now. Haha. Bye-bye.